Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast, where we highlight ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
So hi, welcome. Today we are doing another episode of talking about pirates. Last time I got to chat about Blackbeard, and today it's Caron's turn to talk about her pirate. So although we decided it'd be fun to talk about before we go into the pirates, what are we crocheting or looking forward to crocheting?
Yeah, what are you working on right now? We're just gonna slowly turn this into crochet podcast. You won't even know.
Got to ease you in somehow. Well, I am working on these little penguins in costume, and I had this fun yarn that I wanted to use, and it's supposed to be like a penguin in a dinosaur costume or pajamas. And I had also misread which way the colors go. So now I've also created a unicorn, a little penguin unicorn, and I'm working on making a dinosaur one. So I'm excited. And
cute.
You've been traveling. So what are you looking forward to making when you have energy again?
Well, yeah, I just got back from 2 amazing weeks in Iceland, which if 10 out of 10, if you guys have never been, please go. And also this was my 3rd trip. So if you want to hire someone to project manage your trip, I'm your gal. So reach out, because I'm getting to be really good at this. Nice. But yeah, I found a free pattern on Instagram for a kitty, and I haven't done any kitties. So that's what I'm going to do. And for the last 2 days, I've kind of looked at it and thought, holy crap, this jet lag is really kicking my butt. And I did not even have the energy to start crocheting, which you would think doesn't take a lot of energy, but actually it does. It's a lot of concentration and counting, and I did not have the focus for that, but hopefully feeling a lot better today. So I actually got a relatively normal sleep in that timeline. I wasn't up at 2 a.m. or anything stupid this morning.
And you got to hang out with Puffins while you were gone?
I did. Oh my God. I texted Kristen when I got there. I was like, so this trip is I've seen puffins from afar, but this is the first time we drove way out of our way to this eastern fjord where someone recommended going to see puffins there, and they're literally right there at your feet. And I screamed and ran like a child, so much joy and excitement just to see these cute little puffins and be so close to them and spend time with them. It was a very joyous moment. I was very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was almost 50-year-old woman screaming with glee. It was wonderful.
Love it. Have you figured out where you want to go next?
No, I actually have started surveying some of my clients, where's one of their favorite vacations that they've done in terms of adventure. I'm not really looking for a week of just sitting on the beach reading a book, and I'm not going to Vegas. That's just not me. I need to be in the environment, in nature. And I've gotten quite a few votes for Peru, so I've started kind of looking at Peru. I've also started looking at maybe Ireland, Scotland, because I don't really like the heat. So that sounds a little bit more my temperature. But yeah, just kind of looking and see what's next, because definitely now have the bug again. That was my first trip since 2019. So I'm got home and was ready to go again.
Yeah. I saw yesterday, Alaska Airlines had from Portland pretty cheap tickets to Nassau. And I was like, I could go on a pirate adventure.
Could go on a pirate adventure for sure.
Go to Nassau, pretend I'm a pirate from the Golden Age.
Yeah. Or
Mhm.
you can go to China, which is where we're headed with, and research the golden age of piracy there.
Yes. So tell us, did you figure out what to call her first of all?
Okay. So this is so interesting. Okay. So the pirate I have chosen is Zheng Yi Sao. Okay, the Chinese pirate queen, the ultimate, like, most successful pirate in the world. So as I started my research into this, there's a few things that are really interesting, and I'm gonna like talk a little bit about like just the misinformation that is out there about her. So Zheng Yi Sao is what she's called, but that's not her name. So there's a couple of reasons why. So Zheng Yi Sao really just me. And first of all, I don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese, and I am doing my best, and I listen to like podcasts and all this stuff. So I'm trying to do my pronunciation. So if I have any Mandarin or Cantonese listeners out there and I'm butchering something, I'm sorry. I really try. I'm sure you'll let us know in the comments.
Yeah, you can let us know.
You can let me know. Let me know. But okay, so Zheng Yi Sao literally means wife of Zheng Yi. Okay, so that's how she is referred to. So that's not actually her name. So some research into her real name is Shi Yang. And they said it's somewhere between Yang and Yang. So we're going to go with Shi Yang, but I will refer to as Zheng Yi Sao because that is her common name. And even Shi Yang as her name is somewhat questioned. And we'll get into this a little bit when I talk about like the research and history into her life. Because she was referred to as names written in Mandarin, but where she's actually from, she would have spoken Cantonese. So there's a lot of this with like her husband's name, all these names that they were given Mandarin names, even though they were actually Cantonese. So, and we'll, like I said, I'll get into that research. Really good sources that I found. I listened to a podcast called The History of China podcast, which was really great. And that kind of sent me to a book called The Flower Boat Girl by Larry Fane. I don't know. He's white and I still butcher his name. So, and this guy was he lived in China, lived in the area, the south of China where she would have been. And it was really interesting. He kept hearing these stories from people who like their grandparents would sing these like folk songs about a female pirate, and none of them could really remember all the words. And he started out by trying to find the words to this folk song about this female pirate that nobody could quite remember. So it kind of seems like that folk song died with the elders in the community, but it got him interested in researching this and finding out more about this. And so he started his research, and he wanted to write a historical novel, which is what he did. So if you're interested in historical novels, check out The Flower Boat Girl by Larry Fine, whatever, Feign. So I'm gonna go with Fine.
Could even be Fame.
Could be Fame. I know, right? But yeah, The Flower Boat Girl. So it is a historical fiction in that he researched this book for like 5 years, finding like some true historical accounts. So the things that are known about like different battles and things that actually took place, those are all correct. And he kind of filled in the gap with what made the most sense for the story. So there was a lot of like fantastical information out there about her, which didn't actually make a lot of sense. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Well, I'll talk about it now. So most of the information out there about her was actually written, an account written by a Chinese civil servant in 1833. So this is about 23 years after her pirate confederation had kind of left the scene. And he wrote this from a more with a more nationalistic agenda. So there were accounts of the pirates that were written by the British and by the Portuguese navies, who, as you come to see, were had to be recruited in to help to deal with the pirate issue. But basically, the Portuguese were like, "Yeah, well, we would have been more successful if it weren't for those incompetent Chinese Navy." And then the British were like, "Well, yeah, we would have done more, but if it wasn't for the incompetent Portuguese and Chinese Navy." So they're all kind of blaming each other on why they couldn't deal with the pirate confederation at the time, led by Zheng Yi Sao. So yeah, this is about.
They were all talking about why they couldn't control her, specifically her. Okay, so this is 3 different countries that all are like, I had no control over one woman.
And blaming each other. So this is 23 years after the Confederation finally dissolved. And like I said, he was a Chinese civil servant that wrote this from a nationalistic agenda. So that the other 2 were blaming the incompetent Chinese, and they're like, no, this is actually what happened. So again, his account, a lot of the facts of like the battles and the this and how many ships and all of that stuff is factual, written with understanding that is written with an agenda. And then he just filled in the gaps of what he didn't know about conversations and relationships and all this stuff that he would never have been privy to. So it's almost like this document is half fiction, half nonfiction. Okay, so this is where the majority of like the accounts of what happened has come from. So then in the 1920s, an American journalist, I guess he found this account and basically regurgitated everything from that document, didn't cite his sources, just claimed it as his own, and wrote these like articles and these accounts of Zheng Yi Sao. So what happens then is further like historians, when they read his accounts and they wanted to do their own research, then they would find the document written back in 1833, which is like almost verbatim, and be like, wow, I found the source, this must be true. So even though his was already half fiction. So this is where a lot of those false stories come from, which is, I thought, really interesting just to kind of mention. It's like this weird game of like a historical telephone. So anyway, so this guy, Larry Fane, that wrote The Flower Boat Girl, did his own research, and he went into the accounts of like court documents for trials and all of these other accounts, and even so far as to like to get some more firsthand accounts of like what was it like to have the pirates raid your village and all of these things. And then he also filled in the gaps, which is why his book is a historical fiction novel. So yeah, so that's, I just wanted to get that out of the way, so that like if you're like, oh, that's not what Google told me, this is why that there's actually a lot of misinformation out there about her. But so Zheng Yi Sao was born in 1775 in the South China. She was part of the boat people, who I guess in this area they were like considered the lowest class of people. So they would be the equivalent of India's like the untouchables. And in fact, this is a class of people that it was forbidden for them to receive education, so they could never actually get a civil servant job and like move up through the classes. So,
and real quick, you said 1775?
1775.
Okay. And so if we're going to put on a timeline to like this is almost a full generation, like a full human life after Blackbeard. So so like we're in the golden age of piracy. I don't know when it ended. So, we're so historically accurate, but
this would be the Chinese golden age of piracy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, to put it into perspective, she, at her height, she had about 1,500 ships and about 18,000 men. Blackbeard, I have a note here from, he had about 20 ships and 500 men.
Really? Because the highest I heard was about 300 under him.
That's what, this is just what they were, like the comparison that they were making. So.
Yeah, and I'm guessing your guy was a lot more historically accurate than what I'd come up with.
So she was part of the boat people. I couldn't find out how it happened, but she ended up being a flower boat girl, and flower boats are basically floating brothels. So she worked as a prostitute, and eventually she paid off her like indentured servitude debt or whatever, and she ended up back in her village, and then this is when her village got raided by the pirates, and she would have been taken captive and taken aboard the pirate ship. So this raid was from her village. She was abducted by Zheng Yi. Okay, so he was the captain of the ship. So we do actually have to talk a little bit about Zheng Yi, because he plays quite like an important role in at least the first half of what happens with her until he dies. So Zheng Yi actually came from a dynasty of pirates, is like a pirate family. So
interesting.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. And at the time when she would have been abducted from her village, Zheng Yi he fought in his cousin's fleet, and his cousin's name is Zheng Yi, I think. So he had his own ship, and he fought in the fleet for his cousin. So he also had what they refer to as his adopted son, Zheng Bao. So Zheng Bao was abducted in 1798 at the age of 15. So a little bit of research into this, like abducting a young boy, and then having him as his adopted son. So apparently this was common practice, that a captain would, in their raids, when they raided the villages, they would take women and children in these raids, and it was almost like a thing of rank, where the captain would then, if there was a young boy that he saw maybe some promise in, he would take them, and they would be their adopted son. But not only that, but he would be like his male concubine. So they would also have a sexual relationship. And so it's really interesting, because this apparently like homosexuality was really super common and almost like the norm on the ships. So the captains would have a young boy, and generally I said between the ages of 12 to 15, that would be like their apprentice, their mentor, but also their bed partner.
Lucky boy.
Lucky boy. And if he fulfilled kind of that promise that the captain saw in him, and maybe the captain didn't have sons of his own, or sons were like, I don't know, good pirates, then this boy would basically be their adopted son, and then would take over from them and like kind of inherit their pirate ways, or whatever, their fleet. Or so all this to say, Zheng Yi had his adopted son / lover, Zheng Bao, and at the time he was 15. Okay, so he I tell you this because he plays like an important role going on in the whole story of Zheng Yi Sao. So at this time, before the raid, and sometimes during, there's a lot of timelines, and I'm not going to go into like all the battles because there's a lot of different battles. But the Chinese pirates were also used as privateers during the Vietnam Civil War.
Oh.
So they spent a lot of time in Vietnam, fighting for one side of this civil war. At the time, it was called Annam, before it was called Vietnam. So it was during that time in 1802 that Zheng Yi's cousin, who was in charge of the fleet that Zheng Yi was in, was actually captured and executed in the Vietnam Civil War that they were fighting. Okay, so then that is when he went back to China. Okay, so you've got Zheng Yi and Zheng Bao, the cousins, been executed. Zheng Yi is now in charge of his cousin's fleet, and they go back to China. So at this time, there's a lot of violence and infighting among the pirates. Okay, so there's just chaos, and nobody's really working together at this point. And this is when so Zheng Yi Sao she kind of got stuck on this boat after this raid. She decided, like, eventually the point where, like, well, I guess I'm stuck here. I might as well kind of make the best of it and learn more and be an active participant. And did I put when they got married? Anyways.
Sometime.
At some point.
There was a magical wedding.
Yeah. At some point, Zheng Yi Sao and Zheng Yi are married. And Zheng Yi Sao kind of becomes the brains behind the operation. So Zheng Yi is obviously still the captain and leading the fleet, but she is advising and kind of the brains behind the operation. And so there comes a point where Zheng Yi Sao and Zheng Yi help to unite all the pirates into a pirate confederation. And there's actually an agreement that was signed in July of 1805, uniting all of the pirates into one confederation.
A pirate code.
A pirate code. So there ended up being 6 different fleets, and they were all known by color of flags. So there was the red fleet, black fleet, blue, white, yellow, and purple fleet. And Zheng Yi commanded the red fleet, which was the largest. Okay. So Zheng Yi and Zheng Yi Sao have the red fleet. They've united everybody. The other thing that they did was, so I guess pirates were quite a big problem. And there was, even just within like the fishing villages and communities, there was a lot of violence, and shit wasn't great. So once they got everyone together in this confederation, they made this system of, like, I mean, basically extortion, but like you pay these fees for protection and all of this stuff from the pirates. So they actually brought peace to the area for the first time in like hundreds of years.
Like the Chinese mobsters.
Yeah, basically
money.
Right? So they basically become the Chinese pirate mobsters. People pay their protection money, and like commerce and peace like started happening in the region. Because I guess the Chinese Navy was like really poor. And so anytime what I read was like, if they destroyed two Chinese ships, then only one would be rebuilt. So like they weren't really pouring a lot of money into their Navy. And so they weren't able to do anything about the pirate problem in the South Coast. So they kind of took it upon themselves and brought peace and stability to the area for the first time in like hundreds of years. So, oh yeah. Oh, I gotta have a sip of tea. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
It's an exciting story.
It is an exciting story, and there was just so much to it. There's a lot of meat to this.
Well, and it has me wondering as you're talking too, like in comic books and TV shows, they talk about the triad, like the Chinese gang mobs. And I almost wonder if somewhat of that comes from like is born from the pirates coming in and being like, I'll protect you if you pay money. Because that would also make sense, like traveling over to the United States, having the ability to if it came down from pirating. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out
or
there.
even like, I don't know. Have you watched Narcos? Narcos?
No, not much of it.
Okay, but like, yeah, so when you have like all these drug lords and they come together for the common good, which the common good is making and selling and distributing more drugs, so not quite so good. But like together, instead of like squabbling and fighting against each other, they're actually work together. And what it said is each fleet had to give up a little bit, right? But for the overall greater good, but you're overall going to get more anyways. So yeah, so it was kind of cool of how they put this together so that, like, I mean, if you think about the region, like this is where she grew up. So she grew up obviously with pirate raids and all of this stuff, which is how she ended up on the ship. So to bring like some peace and stability to that region must have been like kind of felt pretty good.
Yeah.
So during this time in 1803 and 1807, she had two sons, was Zheng Yi.
Natural born sons, they don't have to become lovers. They can just be natural born sons.
From what I've heard.
Okay.
Yes. They are not required to become basically
apprentice lover sons.
Apprentice lover concubines. No. So on the 16th of November, 1807, Zheng Yi fell overboard during a storm and died at the age of 42. Okay, so the husband is no longer. So this is when Zheng Yi Sao took over running the entire pirate confederation from her husband, and Zheng Bao took command of the Red Fleet. Okay, so adopted son lover now in charge. Yes, now in charge of the entire Red Fleet. But Zheng Yi Sao has the entire pirate confederation.
Oh, okay.
And at this time, and some say earlier, this is when they began their sexual relationship.
So her with the concubine son lover?
Her adopted son lover. Yes, her and her adopted son, dead husband's lover, are now in a sexual relationship.
Okay. Which I would suspect probably had something probably happened while he was still alive too, if he was a concubine.
So a lot of accounts say that probably started before, but this is when then like it became known that they were together, which is kind of just a whole crazy love triangle, but it is what it is. So they're together. He's got the Red Fleet. She's got the whole like kit and caboodle. So in 1808, basically the Pirate Confederation became a lot more active. And in the first two battles of the year, they reduced the Chinese provincial fleet by half, which cleared the way for the pirates just to invade the entire area. So 2 different battles in 1808, they got rid of half of the Chinese fleet and pirates were taking over the area. And there's a whole list of all these different battles and things that happen, all of which the pirates were pretty much winning. So this is a very, very active time. So in September of 1809, so Zheng Yi Sao took the ship of Antonio Botelho Holman, something like that. Anyways, he was the Portuguese governor of Timor. She took his ship. And so in September of 1809, the Portuguese got involved because they were pissed at her for taking the governor's ship. Okay, so now they're getting involved. And then they also got then the British decided to get involved, and I haven't really figured out why they got involved.
Just for
but
fun.
Just for fun. I mean,
Because
the British,
America wasn't really getting involved yet, so the British had.
yeah, I don't know. We'll
They were
just
the
say
world police
we'll
then.
just say colonization. I don't know. So, anyways, the British had 60 warships. The Portuguese had 6 warships, and they joined with the Chinese to try and put an end to the pirates in the region. So basically, they weren't seemingly able to beat them in battles, and I've read a bunch of like battles that failed, where they tried to like set ships on fire and adrift towards the Chinese, or to
like a fire ghost
pirates,
ship,
right? And somehow they like turned them around and sent them back, and
weird.
And their ships burnt down. Anyways, there's just some crazy ass shit. Do your Googles. Like, this would be like a 17-hour podcast episode if I went through like all of the stuff that happened. But so what they were successful in was basically cutting off the pirate supply lines. So this is how they were more successful. So in like putting an end to the pirates. So they cut off their supply lines.
What was their supply? What were their supplies? Like food and stuff like that?
Food and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically they put a chokehold on the area. So the pirate, I'm guessing that they also couldn't like come and go as they had been.
So like the communities that they were giving the forced protection to, you pay me, I protect you. They were cutting off the people from that. Okay.
So then starting in April of 1810, they started negotiating a surrender. Now they say that part of it was because they were cutting off the supply lines, that they decided that this was good time to surrender, but also because they were coming to the negotiation from a position of power. Okay, so going in with a position of power that they could get more from when they surrendered, which it seemingly worked.
Nice.
February is when the negotiations started. On April 20th, 1810, Zheng Yi Sao and Zheng Bao surrendered with 17,318 pirates and 226 ships.
Wow.
Zheng Bao was given the rank of lieutenant in the Chinese Navy, and he was able to keep his private fleet of 30 ships. So this is when the two Zheng Yi Sao and Zheng Bao were officially married. All of their crews were pardoned, and all of their crews received pork, wine, and money as part of the negotiation.
Awesome.
So basically, everyone's given their retirement package, and they're pardoned for any for all piracy.
Awesome. And what do you do with 17,000 pirates? Is that in the story?
They didn't mention, but I suspect if Zheng Bao became a lieutenant in the Navy, I suspect a lot of them joined the Navy as well, because after their surrender, Zheng Bao and Zheng Yi Sao together were actually defeated the Blue Flag fleet with the Chinese Navy. So they just kind of surrendered, took their pork and wine and money, and turned coat and just started fighting the pirates and defeated the Blue Flag fleet, which I thought was crazy. 1813, she gave birth to another son with Zheng Bao. So she's got all this time, she's being a badass pirate. She's also a mother of 3 boys. So we'll just put that out there. Doing it all. In 1822, at the age of 36, remember, he was a boy, Zheng Bao died while serving as a colonel in the Chinese Navy. So after his death, Zheng Yi Sao says that she actually just lived a peaceful life after that the piracy came to an end, and actually established and ran a very successful gambling house. And she died in 1844 at the age of 69. So yeah, when piracy was over, she started a gambling house and ran that until she died.
Slightly peaceful life. More of that, like,
Probably,
you pay me, I protect you kind of stuff going on.
Probably. I mean, she had transferable skills. Like when you go from the brothel to piracy to then establishing a gambling house. Yeah. So like I said, there are a ton of like stories and accounts of the actual battles, because those were recorded both by the British, the Portuguese, and the Chinese governments, as well as stuff from Vietnam. But like I said, I don't have the number of hours that I think it would take to go through all of those crazy battles. Yeah, so really cool. They took over basically the south coast of China into Vietnam. They easily defeated the Chinese Navy, and it took the British and the Portuguese to help in order to like basically not even win them in battles, but to cut off their supply line. And they surrendered under a very powerful position, and continued just now working for the Chinese government.
So they went from pirates to privateers. Yeah,
they did. They went the other way.
They did. And I'm still trying to picture, like, what do you do with 17,000 pirates, some of whom have been generationally like living this life, others whom have had their villages raided and were forced into this life. And now you're taking 17,000 of them and putting them like, here you go. You no longer can do what you're doing. Now find something new to do. So I again has me wondering if that's like part of with like the Chinese gangs and all of the things that we now see today. If they were born, like many of them were born, because that's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, and they didn't mention like where they went. Like I said, I would assume that some of them would have followed Zheng Bao into the Navy. But yeah, it's crazy to think. And then it also didn't mention how much money they were given. So maybe they were given enough money that they could go and kind of settle, and I don't know if they were like coming from fishing villages, reestablishing themselves in a fishing village and like and starting over. But yeah, they didn't really go into what the heck those 17,000 something pirates did after they surrendered.
Then that'd be interesting all on its own. Yeah. I mean, her story as it is, like going from were they all fishing villages that were attacked? Since I'm assuming pirates, they were.
Yeah, generally the fishing villages along the south coast there.
So going from fishing village to being in a brothel, and then getting free from that, and then getting captured into the pirate,
right?
And then taking charge and saying, I'm gonna show you how this is done.
Right. And there was a couple of really interesting things that like I found that were contradictory to things that were like commonly said. So it's commonly said that she was abducted from the brothel, and listening to the History of China podcast and these historians talking, they were like, well, that doesn't make any sense because the brothels were the pirates' clients. So they wouldn't have stolen from their own clients. So it's more likely that she paid off her debt while working on the brothel and then had returned to her village where the pirates did do raids and abduct people. So that was one thing. And then the pirate code that was actually written, which was mostly attributed to Zheng Yi Sao, was actually falsely attributed to her, and the majority of it was written by Zheng Yi. However, I did find additional codes that were issued by her for the pirate code. So I don't know. Do you want to hear the ones that were okay? Sorry, and I misquoted. It wasn't Zheng Yi, it was Zheng Bao. Zheng Bao. So his 3 codes that he wrote for the Red Flag Fleet once Zheng Yi died and he took over. So his code he wrote was, if any pirate, number 1, if any pirate goes privately on shore, he shall be taken, his ears mutilated, and he will be paraded around the fleet and executed.
Oh, wow.
So like, there ain't playing. Number 2, not the least thing shall be taken privately from the stolen and plundered goods, and all should be registered. The pirate receives for himself out of 10 parts only 2. 8 parts belong to the storehouse called the general fund. Those who steal anything out of this general fund shall be executed. Number 3, women captured from villages shall not be harmed or harassed. All women captives shall be registered, their place of origin recorded, and be given separate quarters. Those who rape or commit adultery with the women captives shall be executed. So those had been attributed to Zheng Yi Sao, but it was actually Zheng Bao who wrote those. So the additional codes that she did include, anyone caught giving commands on their own or disobeying a command from a superior is to be immediately decapitated.
No walking the plank here, just off with your head.
I feel like her second husband / adopted son, I feel like he was a little bit more generous, like, don't rape women.
Yeah, he's like, I understand this life, so I'm surprised he didn't add in also apprentice, lover, child. Stop that too.
Pilfering from the common treasury or public fund and stealing from villagers who supplied the pirates were also capital offenses. No pirate could retain any good before inspection. Goods had to be registered and then distributed by the fleet leader. And 20% of the booty was to be returned to the original captor, and the remainder was placed in a joint treasury or storehouse. Currency was to be handed over to the squadron leader, part was turned over to the fleet, and some back to the captor. So those are the ones that she actually added in. So just to clarify a few, wrongly attributed things to her, and to let you know what she did actually say, which I can understand. If you read the first 3, you would be like, oh, obviously a woman said that, like, don't rape women, but but I guess it wasn't her.
I'm still surprised he also don't rape the boys, but
I guess that was okay back then. That was just the norm.
Maybe it was something they actually hoped for. Oh, maybe hopefully a pirate will take me as their apprentice.
Right? But yeah, The Flower Boat Girl by Larry Fine. If you are at all interested in pirate Chinese historical literature, I would check that out. So it's an interesting book. I listened to it on audio, so this was very helpful for some of the pronunciations as well, for the names. But yeah, and then the Chinese History podcast has a really good episode on it. And I listened to some other podcasts as well who give a lot of the information that, like, you'll just find on the Google. Yeah,
the Googs.
The Googs. So yeah.
Any
questions about Zheng Yi Sao that I might be able to answer for you?
I don't know. I'm trying to, because I don't even know what question I would ask.
Well, I just love the fact that, like, when she retired from piracy and then the Navy, that she just opened a gambling den. Like, there's nothing traditional about her.
Have you seen the show The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel? It's on Prime.
I don't remember.
It's about a comedian. It's funny. It's a good show, funny show, nothing to do with pirates. But there is a character in there that her family has a Chinese gambling business. They run mahjong gambling down in the basement of the club that another character rents out. And so he finds out that in the basement there's this underground mahjong gambling center, and they actually don't want him doing that well because it draws attention to what they're doing below. And that's what I'm imagining her doing. Like I see her on a boat with this mahjong gambling. And also these mobster guys go to like dig into her, and they come back and they're like, we're not digging in anymore because these people will disappear you.
Yeah, right. Like I'm sure she still has 17,000 odd connections out there.
Yeah.
Well, and it was really interesting learning like just some really interesting facts of like so the boat people, so a lot of the girls on the flower boats, because they were like poor and they were living and working on boats, they actually didn't do foot binding.
Oh.
So because their feet weren't bound, they were actually cheaper
Oh, yeah.
than the like land prostitutes that had their feet bound, which I thought was just crazy because they're like, that's stupid because these women need to like walk and work on boats.
Yeah.
But then they ended up being like the cheaper prostitutes because the foot binding was like the thing of beauty, which
is weird.
Which is so weird.
Breaking feet to keep them tiny. Yeah, I can't imagine that was even pretty looking.
No, if
Like,
you've ever seen them like what the actual feet look like, it's horrendous.
Yeah, I haven't seen what they look like.
Oh yeah, Google if you dare.
If you do. Well, so they weren't even putting feet in shoes though either, were they? Weren't they in like sandals, or am I confusing Japanese and Chinese culture now with the geishas? And
no, I think they were in shoes, and they were like yeah. If you Google the pictures, they just look completely distorted, which they were obviously because they were broken and bound to look small, and they have these weird like huge arches. But I just thought that was really interesting that like not only are the boat people like the lowest class, but these are the cheapest prostitutes because they didn't bind their feet because they had to live and work on boats. So they needed their feet. So yeah, she wouldn't have had her feet bound, which obviously helped her to like do more work on the pirate ship.
Yeah.
Which, and I don't, sometimes it's hard to tell like whether this is like fact or fiction from the novel, but like once she kind of started resigning herself to the fact that she wasn't going to escape and get back to her village, that she was kind of stuck, then she started taking an interest in like learning how the weaponry worked and all of this. And like, yeah, like I said, I don't know if that's fact or fiction, but it makes for a good story. And that she was like learning how to like work the cannons and clean them and like and maintain them and stuff. And it makes sense if like she ends up, commanding the entire pirate confederation, that she would know the ins and outs of the actual business and how things operate.
Yeah, make a good story, even just imagining like her going from like the small fisher girl, possibly learning from like mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, all the ins and outs there, and then learning within the sex trade ins and outs there. And if she's saving her money to get her way out, which I'm guessing a lot of people aren't doing, so she had to figure out a lot of other ways to manipulate things in her favor and figure out ins and outs to make the money for that. And then going back to her village. So yeah, I'm guessing just from all of that, like, first of all, she had a good head on her shoulders, and also that she was, trying to like she had all these different little things that were adding up in her life to lead her to being like, yeah, I know ins and outs of these things and these things. And I can see where you can make this thing better and learn. I already know about all these different tools, so why not learn some more? So
yeah. They even said I think it was in the History of China podcast that most women don't work their way off the flower boat. So they just stay and like continue the trade. But yeah, she did. So I mean, even just learning a little bit about like finances and like being organized and all of that stuff, like those all, like I said, transferable skills for later on when you're going to become the greatest pirate queen that ever existed. But yeah, and I also thought it was fascinating that the Chinese Navy couldn't do it alone. It took the English and the Portuguese to help, and the only reason the Portuguese got involved was because she took one in their ships.
Yeah.
So they were mad. Like, oh, that was good.
Take our governor's ship. We're going to come after you.
Right? How dare you? How dare you?
Make us look bad.
And I love how they supplied 6 ships, and then the English supplied 60.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like 100 years after the whole Spanish War, where they're going after Spanish ships because of the king dying. So yeah, I wonder at this point in time too, like where it falls in with Portuguese government and all that. Because did the Portuguese colonize anywhere, or were they just using it for trade?
Portuguese are big colonizers.
Are they?
Yeah.
So they were colonizing, not just trade.
Yeah. So all that I had found was that it was September 15th, 1809, when the British joined to help patrolling like the inner passages of where she had her stronghold, but I couldn't find anything that said why. So, and we're just gonna say colonization. I don't know.
I mean, if it were 200 years later, 200 and 300 even years later, it'd be America doing that. So
that's true.
So maybe they just were like, I don't know. There could have been lots of reasons. Maybe they were allied with Portugal at the time, or maybe they were just like, I don't like what you're doing. I don't want it coming over this way, so I'm gonna go get involved. Who knows?
True, because when did the English have Hong Kong?
Have what?
Hong Kong.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I feel like I should have known.
Well, and I wonder, because the English would have had India. Did they have Pakistan, or was that never colonized by?
I don't know.
The British. Because they would have been on that coast just south more. So, and if they had Hong Kong.
So 1842. So it was later.
That's when they got it?
Until 1997 was Hong Kong was run by the British. So, and maybe that's all part of their journey.
Yeah, and they could have been involved in trade at that point in time too. So they actually found China and India and not America.
They found it.
They found it by boat and
was
not
it
just
lost?
by land. Well, remember, like Columbus goes to America looking for India.
Yeah, it's true.
He didn't find India.
No.
Very far off.
But yeah, so that was like deep rabbit holes for that. And I don't know who I'm gonna do. Do you know who you're gonna do next?
So I decided I wanted to do Anne Bonny, and you can't really do Anne Bonny without doing Mary Read. So I'm gonna look into both of them. And I found a few YouTube videos that actually are about both of them, because it's really difficult to do one without the other.
Yeah.
Which I had said I thought Anne Bonny was one of Blackbeard's wives, but no, that was Calico Jack. So Calico Jack was pirating at the time of Blackbeard. They probably crossed paths, but she was married to Calico Jack later on.
Gotcha.
So,
yes. I don't know who I'm gonna do next.
I was trying to remember the name. You sent me a TikTok one time of an Irish woman who she became a widow and like had at least three kids, and she became a pirate after her husband died. I was trying to remember what her name was, but she didn't even start till later in life, and then was really successful at it too.
Don't know.
But yeah, there's There's a lot out there, but a lot of them are all at the same time as like when Blackbeard was. So although Blackbeard was a very small blip on that timeline, I forget that like there was still at least 100, if not 150 years after that it continued to go.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting too, like who were the last pirates of before it died off? Like who were the ones that still remained?
Yeah, because the other interesting thing, I keep saying interesting because this is just fascinating. But the actual pirates in the South China, they so the Confederation ended in 1810, but pirates still remained in the area until the 1920s.
Oh wow,
which is crazy. Like it wasn't that long ago. It was obviously it wasn't the golden age. And there's still pirates like to this day that like I've listened to some interesting podcasts about like even in like in China and like I think this podcast was called something like the Lawless Seas or something about like the piracy that goes on nowadays. So I mean pirates are still happening.
Yeah.
But not obviously to the same extent of what it was.
Yeah. And I wonder too, because there's the different sides of it. Like there's the piracy of forget the word I'm looking for, but like the people that are going out and getting shark fins and killing whales and things like that. And then you could look at it, the pirate from the other side of like groups like Sea Shepherd who are coming in and stopping them from doing illegal activities out in the ocean.
Yeah.
But and then there's what was it? Like was it James? We talked to him way back. He's part of the Be More Pirate crew. James Berg. He was supposed to be doing a podcast with a real life pirate. I don't know if anything happened with that, but that was a real life pirate. And I wanted to hear the story of too.
Yeah. The podcast series that I was talking about just now is called The Outlaw Ocean. And it covers the various different ways of that piracy is still happening and like abductions and slavery and all this crazy stuff. Basically how like all this illegal stuff is still happening out in the oceans because they're not under anyone's like jurisdiction. So if you want to listen to what's going, and some of this is like harrowing, like it was disturbing listening to what is currently going on in the world. But yeah, The Outlaw Ocean was a really interesting podcast series that I highly recommend if anyone interested in that. Keep saying interesting. I think I've said it. You guys should play like a drinking game. Go back and like every time that I say interesting, then just like take a shot and you'll be hammered by the end of this podcast. Make it rum to make it pirate.
Yes. And then tell us how many times you
tell us how many shots did you take, and do not blame us for your alcohol poisoning.
Well, yeah, and I was trying to think when I was listening to me telling about Blackbeard, there were some phrases that I repeated or said again and again. It's funny. I mean, like when you talk for a while, you repeat certain phrases over and over. Start making a bingo board for when we do this of like different phrases that we repeat.
Totally. Absolutely. Cool. Well, I'm actually, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That was fun to listen to.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If you speak Mandarin or Cantonese and I butchered the names, you can send your complaints to piratelivingpodcast@gmail.com. Or hit us up on the social medias.
Tell us on Instagram.
Tell me on Instagram.
Come and pronounce it for us.
Leave me a voice note on Instagram telling me how to say things properly.
You could do it. Yeah, like how on, I think I come across things on YouTube, but I think you can also do it on the dictionary often where it pronounces for you at several different speeds. So just come give us the slow, the medium, and the fast.
Yes, absolutely. Cool beans.
Yeah. So this doesn't make a difference for the listeners. This one's coming out while you're listening to it. But yeah, we'll be doing these about, I think we can maintain doing these about once a month. And
Yeah,
yeah.
they're fun.
It's fun to do.
And you get to listen to us talk for once.
Exactly. And slowly learn what we're crocheting.
Today's intro.
Today we'll tell you about how to crochet a pirate quilt.
Anywho.
Enjoy your day, everyone.